A small shape fluttering through the moonlight. The howling of wolves. A silhouette in the dark, two glistening fangs. No shadow, no reflection. A blanket of mist that follows where it goes. Dead things. Transformation. A thirst for blood. You already know what I'm talking about. You already know who. Brahm Stoker's Dracula is one of the most famous monsters of all time, and for a very good reason. He's essentially a walking amalgamate of folk legends, each so infectiously fascinating that even some of his more far-fetched attributes, a weakness to garlic, the need to be invited into one's home before entering, have become familiar to the point of cliché. But there's one part of the story that's always seemed strangely overlooked to me. A piece of folklore that should be inspiring all kinds of stories the way the rest of the novel does, but for some reason isn't. According to Stoker, apparently Dracula went to a hidden underground university run by the devil himself. They even have a dragon there, and Dracula may even have ridden on it, depending how you interpret the lore. This deserves to be talked about, and it is October, so let's do that. A big thanks to Campfire writing and world-building software for making this video possible. Incidentally, it'll be just the thing if you want to try world-building with any of the material you find in this video. More on that later. It would seem there's a bit of a hole in our general image of Dracula. Nothing serious. This isn't an audit of the character, it's not a fan theory video about some hidden illusion Stoker made somewhere else. Nothing like that at all. Really, it's about a couple of throwaway references he makes throughout the work that could really influence how we envision the character, what stories we choose to tell, how it inspires us, but somehow hasn't so far. At least, not that I've seen. It comes up twice in the original novel, while the character Van Helsing is info-dumping about the Count. First, in chapter 18, where he says, "The Draculas were a great and noble race, though now and again were scions who were held by their coevals to have had dealings with the Evil One. They learned his secrets in the Scholomance, amongst the mountains over Lake Hermannstadt, where the devil claims the 10th scholar as his due." Then, in chapter 23, he says, "He dared even to attend the Scholomance, and there was no branch of knowledge in his time that he did not essay." All told, not very much to go on. And that's okay, because the book is really more about the battle with and the demise of Dracula than it is about his origin. But you kind of have to wonder what this is and why Stoker chose to include it, right? Well, one thing we do know is that he drew a great deal of inspiration from the work of folklorist Emily Gerard, specifically her 1888 essay, Transylvanian Superstition. It's an incredibly fascinating read, and I don't blame Stoker for running with so much of the material there, even if a lot of it is just referential. For him, it may have been one of the few, if not the only, source of information about such things. The depth of his understanding about the Scholomance may have only been as deep as that section of the essay. According to Gerard, the fabled school lies somewhere in the heart of the mountains. Not exactly distinct, but it's what we've got. There, the devil teaches his pupils all the secrets of nature, the language of animals, and all imaginable spells and charms. And he does it in person. So Dracula was training to be an actual wizard, it seems like, under some version of Satan. Explains a lot, really. There are only ever 10 students admitted to the school at a time, 9 of which are released after their studies to return home. The 10th, the devil keeps as a servant. They become his weather maker, are mounted on the back of a dragon, and sent flying through the skies to make the weather. That is, bring storms. When the skies are clear, it's because the dragon is asleep in its home at the bottom of a small, immeasurably deep lake in the mountains south of Hermannstadt, what Stoker mistakenly refers to in the text as a non-existent Lake Hermannstadt. Finally, this lake is said to be the cauldron where is brewed the thunder, which is apparently lent credence by the frequency with which storms visit the location. The shores are littered with the cairns of those struck dead by lightning, and the locals warn travelers not to disturb the water's surface lest they wake the dragon and bring a storm down upon them. Hopefully you're starting to see by this point why Stoker was so drawn to this, and why we had to make a video about it. This is a lot of material for him to just pack into a couple of passing mentions. More than he may have realized, in fact. If this was indeed his only source of information about the Scholomance, he may have accidentally implied some things about Dracula he never meant to. Like, for instance, the possibility that the Count was a ginger. Bear with me here. For the rest of our information, we'll look primarily to native Romanian folklorists, including the prolific Simeon Florea Marian. We might as well begin by making it clear that there isn't actually any place called the Scholomance in Romanian folklore at all. The word Gerard used in her essay was most likely a Germanization of the word Solomonarie, and that actually gets us somewhere because there is a type of sorcerer in the folklore called a Solomonar. And it does fit Gerard's description, school, dragon, devil, and all. And even though there doesn't seem to be much information about the school itself out there, we've got plenty about the Solomonari who supposedly attended it. Probably the most relevant piece of information we have is the suggestion that they're undead. Marian paints the Solomonari as Strigoi, a kind of craven, evil, extremely malicious zombie. Essentially a Romanian proto-vampire with all the same abilities and weaknesses we're used to, the blood-sucking, the transformation, the aversion to garlic and holy symbols and sunlight, the super strength, the stake through the heart, but without all the sexy, shiny Victorianness of our modern concept. Even so, Strigoi or not, you might not actually even realize it if you ran into a Solomonar. They blend in almost perfectly with the locals. Taller than most maybe, with a mane of red hair, but they wear the same clothes as the peasantry and go around begging for alms. Not exactly typical vampire behavior. There's a good reason for it. This is how they keep an eye on the populace, see whose land deserves the attention of the school's weathermaker. Some versions of the legend even suggest that any Solomonar can mount the dragon and guide the storms, and that if you can just find one of them, you can pay them to bring bad weather to your enemies. You could even hire a counter-Solomonar preemptively to keep someone from doing this to you. In a pinch, if you really need to identify one of them, take a look in their bag. They'll be carrying around a birch bark saddle, a branch that was used to kill a snake, and most telling of all, a Solomonar's book, the place where they record all the spells and charms they've learned during their time in the school. So, we have a bunch of vagrant, red-haired vampire wizards wandering around making a show of begging in order to figure out who deserves a thunderstorm so that their dragon-riding friend can bring it to them. Maybe not the image Stoker had in mind for Dracula, but that's okay. Good, even. It can be our image, a fresh take, full of new material. This could be a Dracula, or a point in Dracula's story, that few people have ever even thought to spend time on. And this, mind you, is before we even discuss the dragon. Marian distinguishes it from all the many breeds of Slavic dragon in the region, suggesting it is specifically a Romanian Balaur, which, honestly, hardly narrows things down. Yes, there are some shared qualities between Balauri. They often have golden scales, almost always have between 3 and 12 heads, and they maintain the typical fairy tale dragon obsession with abducting young maidens, but that's about where the similarities end. Romanian folklorist Tudor Pamphile categorizes the Balauri into 3 distinct species: water-dwelling, land-dwelling, and air-dwelling. Because the other 2 don't fly, we can only assume the Solomonar dragon is of the air-dwelling variety. It is, however, worth noting that the water-dwellers apparently live in wells at the center of villages, which seems suspiciously similar to the small lake this dragon occupies. Interestingly, the air-dwelling Balaur is often conflated with the Slavic Ala or Hala, which in standard Serbian means something to the effect of weather demon. And this matters because there's actually a lot of information out there about these creatures, and if they're conflated, we can kind of learn something about the Balaur by proxy. For instance, they can control, or at least influence, the weather. When 2 of them fight, it manifests as a great storm, powerful enough to uproot entire trees. In some stories, they traverse the sky using rainbows as a pathway. In others, they suck moisture out of their surroundings in order to create the rain. But the Solomonar dragon is unique among them. A mere heavenward glance is enough to cause rainfall. It's so large, if it were ever to land upon the ground, it would consume a large portion of the earth. Which is why, in the stories, God prevents it from ever tiring during flight. Kind of sounds like we're dealing with something on a Jormungand world serpent scale here, except it's a dragon, which is, objectively, even more terrifying. That bottomless lake it lives in suddenly makes a lot of sense. Truly, a mount worthy of the legendary Dracula. If he did indeed ever write it. Stoker most likely didn't know this information while he was writing the book, so canonically speaking, this isn't even a question worth asking. But remember, we're not developing a fan theory here. We're finding gaps to fill. There are questions to ask in all of this that canon and local folklore accounts can't, or at least don't, really answer. What if Dracula was one of the devil's weathermakers? And if he was, how did he manage to escape that contract? What was it like for him entering the school? Is it a condition that you become a Strigoi in order to receive the devil's tutelage? Is that how Dracula became the creature we all know today? How did this whole experience, his time in the school potentially riding the dragon, shape the figure we know? Or is there a different version of him altogether that hasn't been written yet, based on all of this? And then, of course, if we look away from the connection to Dracula for a moment, we find even more possibilities. You could, for instance, take this and write something like Harry Potter, but instead of Hogwarts, you have an underground cavern and a bottomless lake. Instead of Dumbledore, you have the devil. And instead of being whisked away on a magical train, you, die. These possibilities, these questions, are where the imagination plays. If any of this sparks an idea, go write about it. Dracula is in the public domain, and the rest is myth, meant to pass from storyteller to storyteller. You could be the next in that chain. Of course, being inspired is the easy part. That's passive. You don't really have to do anything. The next step is to develop the idea, which, as you begin to erect palaces of note cards and labyrinthine text documents, rapidly becomes a chore. If you want to focus more on making the thing and less on the mechanics of organizing it, definitely go give Campfire Blaze a try. Campfire Blaze is a browser-based suite of tools to help you keep your writing organized. Collaborate with friends in real time or work by yourself to flesh out every facet of your story. Develop your manuscript in Blaze's word processor, create characters, design your plot, and world build without restrictions. When you're done, share your story with your friends and fans easily. Expand Blaze's free version by purchasing the tools you need, and then keep those tools forever. Alternatively, build your own subscription so you're only paying for the features you need. Add features for as little as 50 cents or unlock everything for a few dollars per month. And if you're on the fence, no risk. There's a 30-day return policy. And now's a particularly good time to try it out because throughout October, it's in open beta, which means it'll be free until the end of the month. Follow the link in the description to learn more. Write better stories faster with Campfire Blaze. And finally, before we wrap up, I'd like to give a quick thanks to all the helpful humans who support the show on Patreon. All those words you see scrolling in the background of these videos, those are actually the names of our Patreon maintenance crew, without whom this show would be impossible. And a special word to all our top patrons, Excelsius, Lord Gate, RPG Grenade, Puzzling Shutterbug, and the Autumn Rider, thank you so much. Our plan going forward with the channel is to release one of these videos each month, so be sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and leave a suggestion for our next topic in the comments below. We are always eager to find new ideas to steal. Until then, thanks for watching, and keep making stuff up. I'll see you next time. Bye!